Welcome to Ancient Geeks, a podcast from a couple of geeks of a certain age. We look at the development of geek culture through the lenses of our youths, and as informed by decades of geekery. We were geek before it was chic. Podcasts are built on hope. I'm your co-host, Stephen Taylor.
I am your co-host, Tom Grant.
So today on Ancient Geeks, we are still talking about Andor from the perspective of original fans of Star Wars. This is the third of three, and we're going to touch today on a little bit about Rogue One, but also really talk about some larger issues that we would like to discuss and examine about this remarkable TV series. So, but before we do that, of course, what are we doing this week in geekery, Tom?
Well, aside from getting ready for the summer of blockbuster geek movies, Superman and Fantastic Four, also I plan on rereading a lot of the John Byrne run of Fantastic Four, as you've been doing
Yes.
for preparation for an upcoming Fantastic Four episode. And another John Byrne love fest.
Fantastic Fest is in our future. I am reading the Elric books. We talked many episodes ago now that it's a gap in my knowledge, and I'm going to read them so we can talk about them both from your experience reading them as a young person and mine in my dotage. So that'll be fun.
Yes.
So, what theme music would you license if you could for this episode of Ancient Geeks?
For this particular episode, that's a tough one. I think I'm going to just cheat and go back to Neamos. I didn't mention that before.
Well, there
that
are
was your
multiple
pick.
Mixes.
Multiple mixes of it. Yeah. So just like whatever the mix is that fits my mood at the moment, that would be it. How about you?
So I think I mentioned in part one of our trilogy here, I've been listening to a lot of soundtracks on Spotify. A lot of the stuff's on Spotify. So season 2 was a different composer. It was Brandon Roberts, but I liked his music quite. It was good, and I will pick the track "I Have Friends Everywhere" from episode 9, I believe, when Cassian is extracting Mon Mothma from.
Right.
So
one of the great quotable quotes from the series.
Absolutely. So again, this is our third week in a row talking about Andor and its place in the Star Wars universe. And part 1, we really talked about season 1 and major story arcs and character development, and then the second episode was about season 2. Today we'll cap it off with Rogue One, which is in some ways where it all started, ironically enough. Mm-hmm. But as I pointed out in the first episode, time is a flat circle. So we're back. We're back, baby. So I'll ask this before we get into the way it intersects the road with Andor. What was your impression of Rogue One before Andor existed? Do you recall your views on the film?
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good movie. I mean, of course, I still had the bad taste of the prequel trilogy in my mouth. I was not a fan. I haven't gone back and rewatched it. Maybe time will have softened my sharp-edged opinion of the prequel trilogy, but it was nice to see a Star Wars movie that was really good. I thought it was very clever how it kind of connected then as a very immediate prequel to the first Star Wars movie. There were lots about it I liked, lots about it I didn't. We can talk about that, but anyway, what did you think?
So yeah, I mean, I do plan to force you to go back and rewatch the trilogy at some point because I feel like we need to ancient that up, that geekery. Yeah, but
later. But we're going to do Kolchak the Night Stalker before we do that.
At any rate, I remember it being. I enjoyed it when I saw it. I've seen it. I'm fairly certain I saw it in the movie theater, and then I think I saw it one other time, sometime in the last 10 years. And
Did you see Did you see it in 3D?
No, I did not.
I did.
Was it good in 3D?
Yeah. It was a gimmick.
There was that craze. I never was super into. I mean, we saw a number of movies in 3D during that period, but I don't think we saw that one in 3D.
Yeah, since I just rewatched it, I even hadn't even thought of the fact that it was in 3D. I'd completely blanked on it. It wasn't like I was sitting there at my computer saying, "Why isn't this in 3D?"
If you'd asked me 5 years ago, if you'd asked me like to rank Star Wars movies, I would probably put it quite high in the ranking.
Yeah,
I think I enjoy it as a movie more than Return of the Jedi, which we talked about.
Oh, definitely.
It would probably be Empire, Star Wars, and then this movie, Rogue One. it has, it's not perfect. And anybody that knows anything about the movie knows it went through some development difficulties.
Hmm.
And Tony Gilroy, who was the creator and controller or showrunner of Andor, came in and kind of fixed part of it. But yeah, I thought I liked it because it wasn't a Skywalker movie. I liked it because it was more of a rebellion war movie and not just,
Yes.
the stratospheric stuff. Um, and for a prequel, I thought it was an interesting way to examine how they got the intel on Death Star. And
Hmm.
of course, I really liked with a few things that I could critique, but I liked the last scene, which is one of the things Tony Gilroy fixed was that when they're on the planet and they have to and spoilers, Cassian and Jyn Erso die. But I thought it was a poignant movie in that regard. There wasn't a perfect ending for everybody, but the rebellion was able to accomplish its goals
Right.
and continue that fight. So I like that about it.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. It was the ordinary operatives, which is of course
yes,
the real meat of the Andor TV series.
yes, yes.
I did, yeah, I didn't, what I didn't like, there was a little bit in there, and it just, this really bugged me the on the recent rewatch was
Yes,
I was not really struck positively by the female
yeah,
main character. She just wasn't interesting,
right.
and we'll talk about this nasty tendency in Star Wars movies, but just like sticking in that she was the daughter of Galen Erso.
Yes.
I don't know. Was that really necessary? These the way that Star Wars leans so heavily on family relationships
I
for
agree. No,
lead characters.
so I mean, I'll kind of meld this into the question I was going to ask, which is how did Andor change the way you looked at Rogue One?
Yeah,
And I agree with you. Even the first go round, like the whole bit about the rebels didn't really want to attack, but then Jin decided to take control of these rebels and they were going to go anyway. It didn't make sense
that
the
was a
first time.
terrible scene.
Yeah, it didn't, and it made even less sense. I mean, they did do a good job in Andor in the end of season two of showing the politicians kind of all bickering amongst themselves about what to do. So in some ways
Right.
that informed that scene differently, but still the notion that Jyn Erso, who had been this sort of wild child on the run, was take
Yeah.
control of all this made no sense.
Right.
Um,
It
and,
was
and
it's like many hackneyed movie scenes where people don't aren't doing the obviously right thing to do, and that somebody, the main character, has to step in and give a
yes,
speech. And
yes,
in this case, they didn't decide to do the right thing. They just kind of kind of set up that the group that had formed around her had went off on their own mission. But
yes.
come on, she's
No,
really isn't somebody who's going to sway the leaders of the Rebel Alliance at this point.
I recall, and again, this is when it's hard to fully disaggregate what I thought seeing it recently and what I thought seeing it originally. But um, this notion, yeah, that this ragtag group of individuals who would have been haphazardly assembled throughout this movie
Right.
would still be the main heroes didn't make total sense, especially if the rebellion didn't really want to do what needed to be done, even
Yeah.
though there's kind of a mini rebellion within the rebellion because they still send the ships go anyway. And
Right.
I would have preferred really that it would have been a little more of like, okay, we have this intel, we've got to act, and they put together a strike team, and then okay, maybe the ragtag people get put together, which is really kind of the story of Star Wars, but the movie. But you can if you can kind of see some of the seams if you
Yeah.
think about it with the movie, and because some of the stuff with Galen Erso and all that didn't all quite work either. I'm not entirely sure really why the plan was to assassinate him. Like, I'm not sure what that was supposed to solve.
Yeah. It was supposed to slow down the
Yeah,
production of
it's
of the
just
Death Star. I don't
that
know.
that assumed way too much about his pivotal. And even if he was pivotal, why would they not have the knowledge to continue at this point? I don't know. It
Exactly.
just
Exactly. He's been working with a whole bunch of other
yes,
engineers and scientists, so why wouldn't they be able to have
yeah.
osmotically picked up enough to finish the job? Maybe slower, but
So I mean, my main react. I mean, I enjoyed the movie when I rewatched it after Andor. I think it's necessary. I don't know if it's necessary viewing, but it it fits in with Andor, but it feels lesser in many
Yes.
ways. Certainly
Yeah.
compared to the TV series. And in fact, my main reaction was, can y'all give Tony Gilroy a bunch of money to redo Rogue One
Yeah.
and make more sense as it fits into the story of
Yeah.
Andor? But that was kind of my reaction.
And give more to some of the other characters because
Yeah,
I didn't find her that interesting. And
no,
you had, after watching 24 episodes of Andor, a very interesting character
yes,
right there. And then you had the Force monk and the guy with the big gun, and you had the clearly some sort of friendship that went back a little ways, and the two of them were interesting characters.
yeah,
Maybe if you're going to do, like a prequel 60-minute show or something, that would have been interesting. I don't know. It
yeah,
just,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, I think it fits with the show, but the show is just several quanta better.
yeah. Yeah,
Anyway,
it had to, like Rogue One had to be very immediately next to Star Wars, the first movie.
yes.
Uh, and in that sense, then they had to bring in Grand Moff Tarkin
Mhm.
and Princess Leia, and then doing the uncanny valley digital
Yes.
recreations of them,
Yes.
versus Andor, which was enough steps away from the original Star Wars movies that you didn't have to have any of the characters, as we talked about at length, from the Star Wars trilogy in it, except for Mon
Yeah.
Mothma.
Yeah. To a point that I made last episode, I think that I would have preferred they just had recast Grand Moff Tarkin in particular.
Oh yeah,
We didn't
yeah.
need the zombified version. And the Leia thing, you know what? Maybe just leave the cloak over her face or something. I don't know.
We'll know who she is.
Just
Yeah,
maybe from the back. Um, Although I will say I do like the scene where Vader comes in and goes crazy on the rebels,
yeah.
but it is such a contrast of what you can do even 10 years ago, what you could do versus what you could do in 1970,
Right.
the 1970s. Um, Quite a contrast.
Yeah. So
Uh,
enough said about Rogue One.
yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to say about Rogue
Okay,
One, so
because we
let's
have a
move into
lot to say about
we do. So
Andor's significance.
let's just talk for a minute, or as much as is appropriate, about Andor simply as a television program, and its production, its writing, the acting. And I'll reiterate something I said in the first of these episodes. This is just a really good television program that
Hmm.
really can be viewed, I think, even if you don't watch any other Star Wars material at all, including even Rogue One.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think it's worth, like, if you have a spouse or a friend or other person important in your life you're going to watch it with, to kind of set it up a little bit,
Sure.
or be ready to answer questions. But you don't really need to have the
No.
Star Wars lore imprinted on your brain the way it is for the two of us, in order to enjoy Andor. Not at
No, not
all.
at all. Not at all. Not at all. No, I think it fit. I mean, I think it fits into the overall, which is currently a waning era, but the waning era of prestige TV that we've been in.
Right. And it's because that the yeah, a lot of the different intellectual properties that we like can be morphed into different things.
Yes.
So, Star Trek can be the traditional, spaceship going exploring strange new worlds, getting involved in shenanigans, with a crew of, you know, moderately to highly interesting characters in them. You could use that particular motif, but you could also do Deep Space Nine. It's all set on a space station with a bunch of different aliens, and there's the internal politics of the planet nearby that play an important part, and there's the politics of the former occupiers of that planet. Very different motif, and yet it could be still a Star Trek series
Hmm.
doing something different. It's like people who play Dungeons and Dragons or other role playing games. Let's just say Dungeons and Dragons. Like Dungeons and Dragons could be played a lot of different ways.
Right.
It's a morphable property that you could then kind of do the traditional, we're going to kick down doors and take monsters' treasure. Or it could be a mystery, or it could be, a romance. Anyway, there's a lot of different ways you can play that game.
Yes. Yes. Agreed. So I mean, I found that just again as a production, I
Mhm.
mean, the soundtrack is fantastic, even
My
with the
God, is it good?
two different composers in the two seasons. The direction, the set design, the and the direction is fantastic.
Hmm.
We talked a little bit about like how they taught us about the geography of the Gorman Square before they, had the massacre take place, and just and the way in which they uh, block scenes, and clearly the acting is fantastic. We talked about. I mean, Diego Luna has a fairly at times understated performance, but I think you can, especially when I was watching some of it yesterday. He evolves from
Right.
that first season, well, the first couple episodes in particular. First, when he's kind of a thief on the run, and then when he's a mercenary, and then he's a prisoner, and it just he manages to display
Hmm.
this in the way he carries himself and the way he behaves, and of course, it's also in the writing. I thought Stellan Skarsgård was fantastic.
Yep.
The guy that played Cyril Karn, Denise G, whose name I still should have looked up how to pronounce, but I didn't. Um, and all these people, and they just there was not a was there a bad performance in the show that you can think of? Because I can't think of one.
No, there wasn't one. It was just a superbly cast show. And I shout out to, I think his name is Anton Lesser, Messer, uh, Lesser, who was Major Partagaz. I mentioned him
Yes, yes,
before.
yes, yes.
You know, anyway, just it's just everybody just hit their marks really
Well,
well.
and someone else that I want to actually point out, Genevieve O'Reilly, who played Mon Mothma. And the
Yeah.
reason, not only was this a fantastic performance, but I didn't realize until after the fact, but she's like played that character, including in Rogue One,
Hmm.
and in the cartoon, she's voiced the character. And I guess it's just, I don't know that she's ever in any of those performances been able to display this level of acting capacity.
Right.
So it's kind of impressive that someone who voiced the cartoon character in the various animated series that she was like Rebels was also able to perform this well on screen. I just was impressed with that. But
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, and also people in lesser roles like Vel Sartha, the actress I just looked it up, Faye Marsay,
mhm.
whom we also saw in Game of Thrones, who
Yes.
did a terrific job as we were discussing last time, playing somebody who is a genuinely sort of badass person in a lot of ways, but also can have fairly vulnerable moments. I mean, she was good at that.
She
Anyway,
was.
lots and lots of good acting in this show.
Absolutely.
And the
I,
music is the music. We can go back to the music for
no,
a second.
please, please, please,
So
please.
this is what a soundtrack should do, right? It
Hmm.
shouldn't be intrusive all the time,
Right.
and telling you how you should feel about things, but it should supplement what you're watching,
Hmm.
and this soundtrack certainly did, and it did so in a lot of subtle ways, as you mentioned. The theme music evolves over the
Hmm.
course of the series. It also tells a story, like the using my favorite guy, the time grappler, right?
Yes.
If you're going to be playing music on a working class planet where the chief job is salvage, having this guy wake you up in the morning by just banging on a piece of metal, it's just like a great
Yeah.
of composition there, or the theme that we keep coming back to, Niamos.
Yeah.
It has that sort of screeching, uncomfortable quality of a lot of club music. I'm not a fan,
Yes.
but
Right.
it
Right.
is like it does the job. Like it's sort of toe tapping, but it's also annoying at the same time.
Yeah. It's certainly ubiquitous.
Yeah.
Um, and a bit hypnotic, at least in the, again, I think about it most in the scene where Mon Mothma is dancing at the wedding, but yes, um, good stuff all the way around.
We're going to talk
Uh,
about the production design anymore, or
I was going to say that, I mean, it's really very impressive, and I made mention this previous, but it's worth highlighting again that they built impressive sets.
yeah.
And they did a great job of making the place look real and lived in. Um, like I loved the glove wall in Ferrex.
Yes. Yes.
And I And also, as we mentioned before, but it's worth reiterating, they do just a great job of integrating and seamlessly connecting back to a lot of the visual language of Star Wars, going all the way back to the first movie
Right.
without it looking hokey in any way.
Yeah. Or like the artifacts in Luthen's shop.
Yes.
Like you really felt like there was a story behind every one of those,
Hmm.
every one of those pieces. You know, just there were moments like with Ferrix where I just kept thinking like, how do they do that? Like, how
Hmm.
do they build a town like this, and
Yes.
then the radio tower that she crawls up inside and
Right.
the big scrap yards. And
Hmm.
it's just like, or the tunnels that they are going through in episodes. It's like, geez, that's a lot of set or a lot of,
It really was.
very cleverly done, back screen projection kind of work.
So, I mean, I mentioned about it being sort of the tail end of the current era of prestige TV.
Hmm.
It certainly also it stands astride the changing streaming landscape, right?
Right.
Because when this TV show was first conceived of and contracts were signed and funding was established, this was during the pre-strike, and still we're just going to throw money at these shows in the hopes of
Hmm.
getting subscribers, and that's all radically changed. A lot of these streamers are pulling back on new productions. They're not making the money they thought they were going to make on them.
Right.
And I think in some ways this may be an artifact of the past. In some ways,
Yeah.
this show,
Yeah.
because
Are
I
there
forget what
any of the devices you'd want? Like if you got a reproduction of them, because they're great. Like,
they are. Great. Gosh, always. I liked not to go violent. I liked Cassian's gun.
yeah.
It was different. I liked a lot of the ships. Trying to think of specific items. That knife he kills himself with, the Luffy kills himself, is pretty cool looking.
Yeah.
Again, I'm going with weapons, but was there something in particular you were thinking about?
No, I just, like again, we were talked about this before, but like the sort of chunky World War II like, design of a lot of the devices, I thought really worked, and so like when Clea goes to the safe house and pulls out
Hmm.
the signaling device is basically using Morse code.
Yes.
It's not only like I just kind of love that look and feel of all the devices, but it also, in a way, kind of made sense that, okay, if you're trying to like sneak onto a particular frequency that you shouldn't be using and send a signal, you'd use probably the lowest resolution kind of communication possible. Just you'd like tap out a quick message and then get off.
Yes. I mean, it reminds me, we just watched, and I would not recommend this. We watched Zero Day. Did you watch Zero Day? It was on
No.
Netflix. Robert De Niro's in it. It's a political thriller. It's not very good. But the one part about it that reminds me of is the not terrorists, but the cyber criminals realize that their best way of trying to communicate is to go analog. So they're using like these
Uh-huh.
high-powered AM radios to do that kind of. Anyway, it
Okay.
reminds me of that. But I would not recommend.
So I want a B2 emo, I think.
Oh, of course. The other thing one device that struck me is I forget what it was called, but it was the device that Nimic had to help navigate the eye.
Oh, right.
It
Yeah.
almost looked like it was built on a Polaroid camera body because it had that
Yes.
accordion. That was pretty cool. And it was also the idea of this old technology. It wasn't imperial technology.
Right.
Um,
Oh,
so
that
yes,
was another great speech where he's like saying
yes,
like, "Oh, they're trying to get you to buy this, you know, uh, really sort of inferior, cheap technology that you'll have to replace, but here's the
yes,
old stuff that holds
yes.
together, like
But you
like
can fix it yourself.
right, like in our world with refrigerators, the 1960 refrigerator that lasts forever. It will outlive you and your
That's right.
grandchildren.
That's right. Anything else about production, writing? The writing is great. We talked about a lot about the
Yeah, but
speeches, and the dialogue is fantastic, and the acting is fantastic.
yeah, I don't have anything to add.
So here's one of my big questions. Um, and this is actually the thought that I had as soon as I finished it. Because when I first finished season two, even
Hmm.
before I watched Rogue One again, it was almost euphoric about the show. And I'm like, has this ruined Star Wars for me?
Yeah.
Did it ruin Star Wars, Tom?
It didn't. It did underline some things that, as much as I enjoy Star Wars, big part of my
Yes.
geek life for decades, that really just never sat well. Not so much that the movie itself did this, but it was like it became the defining characteristic of Star Wars, and that's the
Hmm.
chosen one narrative.
Yes, yes, yes.
I hate the chosen one narrative. And in some respects, Luke Skywalker is somebody who was born into, the Force a little better than most people and so forth. But it's not like, the chosen one in the prequels, that is turns out to be Anakin Skywalker, that is this sort of salvific figure that there are prophecies about and so forth. I think it's annoying to an extent that the original trilogy is so hyper focused on Luke Skywalker, but not exclusively, to the point where we don't have a feel for the other characters and we don't
Right.
think that they didn't contribute anything, and it's all like Michael Burnham. It all comes down to one person. Um,
Poor Michael Burnham.
Poor Michael
Um,
Burnham. Yeah, so like watching this show, which is the complete antithesis of that. So
right.
here you have ordinary people doing the work, the really hard, dangerous, grimy, often, morally compromising work, that they're the centerpiece of the story about the rebellion. And
Right.
also that, it's not Darth Vader we see for the Empire or the Emperor. We see all these functionaries, who
Hmm.
for a variety of reasons are, trying to execute the great imperial program. That was good too. So that's something I would say. It hasn't ruined my enjoyment of the first Star Wars movies. It's just made me even more allergic to what Star Wars turned into.
Right. So, I mean, and I'm being somewhat tongue in cheek about this. It hasn't ruined Star Wars for me, but it certainly, as you say, amplifies some of the critiques that I have about many of the properties, um, or about just the way in which they've approached the material as a ongoing enterprise, which has been way too focused on the Skywalker clan. I mean, all nine of the main trilogy movies, the three trilogies, they're all about Skywalkers
Hmm. Yeah.
or Palpatines.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't, and I've mentioned it before, and if we ever, if I do in fact force you to watch the prequels and discuss them, but I'll say it again now. I hate it is the dumbest strange conflict they ever created, which was the Force runs strong in families, but Jedi aren't supposed to procreate. Are you people idiots? Um, do you not understand genetics?
Yeah.
And then the way it became kind of a Anakin to Luke and Leia
Yeah.
to Kylo and or to Ben Solo, however you want to put it. It just
Well, it's monarchical.
yeah, it's monarchical. I don't
In
like.
that sense, it's juvenile, and it depends on a monarchical view of the world. That there
Yeah,
are
I'm gonna.
special people who are the
Yes.
ones who make history happen.
Well, yeah,
And
very specifically, right? Because the whole idea of like blue bloods or being, the bloodline or all this stuff, yeah, that you're special because you're in the family. I'm going to come back to that politics point a little bit later as well, but it's just it's tiresome. And again, the thing that I liked the most about The Last Jedi was this notion that maybe that the Force could be a more broader, for lack of a better term, democratized
mhm.
thing with Broom Boy at the end of the episode and all these possibilities. Um, which is suggested by again the Force Monk in Rogue One. It's suggested by the Force Healer at the end of Andor season two. That maybe the
Right.
Force is something else than not just. I mean, the Jedi are ultimately the worst, and I've said this before, and at some point we'll explore what I mean by that, I guess. But
Mhm.
it's frustrating to me because it's a cool concept that never quite worked the way, in my opinion, it should have. Now, I've not watched some of the animated shows. Maybe it works in those shows. I've heard good things about them, but I haven't partaken at this point.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's the same. I had the same reaction when The Mandalorian came out. It's like,
mhm.
oh, thank goodness somebody's doing something different.
Yes, that's right.
They're not doing Jedi's and the Skywalker royal family.
Hmm.
They're exploring this bigger universe. And I was actually disappointed when they finally connected it to the Skywalker family. at the end of season two. I didn't need that, right?
Right. Right.
Like if we're getting off track here, I know,
Yeah.
but like if Grogu had, had somebody else come, who was a Jedi or a pseudo
Right. Right. Right.
Jedi,
Right.
since there really weren't a lot of Jedi running around at this point, whatever to pick him up, that would have been fine, right? I
Right.
didn't like, just kind of lose control over my bladder because oh my God, here's Luke Skywalker, de-aged. Yeah, that
Is this an
didn't do it
ancient
for me.
geeks problem we're talking
And
about here, Tom?
yes, it is an ancient geeks problem. But again, it really bugs me because like it's almost saying like authoritarianism has to be replaced with authoritarianism, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. So, but I think in the following sense, I would say this. It shows how good this can be
yes,
narratively and production wise, um, and how big the Star Wars universe can be also. And then I'm also worried that, I mean, I don't know, this is fine. I mean, something has to be the best. This may be the best of Star Wars in many ways,
yeah,
in my view. Um, we'll see how that ages in my mind, but it may also be the zenith. I'm not sure we're going to come back to this kind of high level narrative again. We'll see.
right.
Um, but I mean, it's still, so how is this? We've said multiple times now that you could watch this without being a Star Wars fan or without even knowing much about Star Wars. But is it still a Star Wars story to you?
Oh, I think it's definitely a Star Wars story.
I
I
agree.
mean, it's definitely woven into the Star Wars narrative, the major narrative for at
Hmm.
least the first three movies. And I think it's also a Star Wars story in a sense, not an artificial sense, but this is a story that will ensure because it's in the Star Wars universe that someone will pay attention to it, right? Like, if you had this set in, like, one of the Eastern European countries that fell to communism, at the end, after the end of World War II, you'd probably get a much smaller audience, even though you could probably still tell a story about uh, oppression and resistance.
Right. I will say this, which is maybe a little silly, but also fits into my did it ruin Star Wars quote unquote question. Maybe it's good that Luthen and Cassian die before the Death Star's blown up because man, it would really probably feel sucky for this doofus farm boy from Tatooine to get all this credit after all the work you did.
Right. Well, and here's how it's also a Star Wars movie. And I'm really, again, leaning on Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Boy, that rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Versus just saying Star Wars. Uh, so let's roll back to the 1970s, since this is all our show is so much about
Sure,
rolling back
sure.
to the 70s and 80s and other
We
decades.
are haunted by the 70s, my friend.
Right. So in the 1970s, there were a lot of science fiction movies. So a quick list: Soylent Green, Alien, Silent Running, A Clockwork Orange, Logan's Run, Westworld, Dark Star, THX 1138, Lucas's
Hmm.
student movie turned into a feature production, Zardoz, A Boy and His Dog. All of these movies are dystopian in some way.
Yeah, and all the Planet of the Apes sequels were in the 70s too, mostly, weren't they?
Oh yeah, Planet of the Apes and so forth. And so the future wasn't necessarily a great place.
That's
It
true.
wasn't Buck Rogers.
That's right.
And
Or
although
Star Trek.
certainly like Star Wars was inspired by Buck Rogers, among many other sources that we can enumerate but don't need to. The grimy feel of a lot of the production design, the things looked like they were lived in or things
Hmm.
looked like they were used, except for the super shiny Empire sets and uniforms and so forth, was as of a piece with that, with
Right.
those science fiction movies of that period. Like, let's not assume the future is a utopia where everyone's wearing very clean, very brightly colored, unitards, and everybody lives in the best, most gorgeous apartment with the best view possible over a shining city and so forth. That's probably not a credible view of even the most kind of fantastical sort of setting like the Star Wars universe. So I kind of it was already there in the original Star Wars movies. People noticed it at the time, but it wasn't completely new. And so I think there's a connection there. And whatever that does for you as a viewer to kind of make you feel a little more willing to accept what you're watching, or, that it is sort of a subtle, a statement that maybe we don't solve all our social problems, centuries from now or whatever. It's there.
No, I think that's an excellent point. But it does, I think, also to your point, it does have a hopefulness that a lot of those movies don't have.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Rebellions are built on hope.
that's what I've been told. That's what the every time I chicken in the Ramada Inn, they tell me that rebellions are built on hope. Um,
And there's that guy who gives you the knowing look when you come in.
sure.
Sure, yeah, your swatches came because
Oh
you're a
man.
fashion designer. Yes, that'll do.
So if this is a morality tale, what's the moral, do you think, to Andor?
Andor,
Yeah.
rebellions are hard, and and they need to start early. You just like to
Yes.
Marva's speech, you can't let them just sort of kind of creep in like rust and destroy everything. I think that's also rebellions take hard choice require hard choices,
Yes. Yes.
uh, and you can't really escape those choices. You
No,
can't be you
they're
can't be
moral
asleep.
compromises. They're moral
Yeah,
compromises that have to be made along the way. And it is different people doing different things. And it's not just we all decide we don't like the bad guys. So
yeah. So
hooray.
it's a this is really going to get into the political science part of
So I
things.
mean that's the next question is how do two political scientists view the rebellion and the empire
Well,
as told by Andor?
so my entree into this is Max Weber and his
Oh dear.
yes, his famous essay Politics as a Vocation, and its
Yes.
corresponding essay Science as a Vocation. So you don't know who Max Weber is, listeners. He was one of the first social scientists, and he was a very prolific writer. And he was asked to give a set of lectures about like what is the core of what it means to be in politics or to be in academia and
Hmm.
science. And the answer he gives to the politics part is really interesting. And one of the things that he says is politics is the slow boring of hard boards.
Yes.
That you don't expect there to be magic solutions. Don't expect everything to turn out the way that you want. Don't expect to avoid getting your hands dirty. It's a wonderful metaphor. And I when I finished Andor, old Uncle Max's maxim came to mind about the slow boring of hard boards. But
That's
ultimately, it's about results. It's a kind of utilitarian view of politics that maybe you occasionally have to shoot an informer in a dangerous situation, or maybe you do have to leave people behind, or maybe you have to do these things. There is a point at which it does turn dark. There are when people really do become corrupted by the dark side. But anyway, it's the politics, especially when you're in a war like this, is morally difficult business that requires a lot of patience, a lot of cleverness, and a willingness to sacrifice. That's what I took away.
no, I think that's fantastic. My part of my problem now is I'm struggling not to think about contemporary politics. Um,
Well, I think,
and
it's an amazing thing that this was all kind of plotted out before we got to where we are.
no, I will point that out, and I think that's important to point out, right? So Gilroy wrote this before the current presidential administration.
Mhm.
While there are clear echoes, I mean, if you can't watch, and I will connect some to contemporary politics because it's just as hard not to. You can't look at the imperial inspections on Mina Rao, also known as Wheat Planet, when
Yeah.
they're asking for, whether the seasonal labor there has the appropriate visas to work or not, even though they need them to work, including the Imperials say they need them to work because they can't really not they can't afford to have the production slow down, but they're also enforcing these visa rules.
Hmm.
And all the fear that creates setting aside the more extreme things that happen to Bix, just generically the notion that the authorities are here, and even though maybe in the past it was a wink and a nod that we're
Hmm.
not going to worry about this because we all really recognize it's necessary, and instead of solving that problem, we're just going to decide arbitrarily when we're going to enforce the rules or not. That's hard not to connect to a lot that's going on in the contemporary U.S. And of course, when you
Yeah.
talk about things like the slow boring of hard boards, that politics and governance is not easy. It takes it takes expertise,
Hmm.
and force doesn't always accomplish the goals the way you want them to, and you can't always control how everybody's going to behave. I think that's all
Right.
kind of central to some of these things.
Yeah.
I would also point out that Gilroy is a quite clearly, if you listen to any interviews with him, he's a student of history. He wrote this about basically based on his own personal reading and knowledge of various revolutions and rebellions, not about contemporary
Hmm.
America. And again, as a political scientist and also someone who enjoys reading history, but really having studied a lot of contemporary. I mean, my the early parts of my political science career were studying Latin America, including political violence, rebellion. My dissertation was on Colombia, even though it was about democratic reform in Colombia. It's kind of hard to study Colombia and not study things like the FARC and the ELN, the
Hmm.
APL, and drug cartels and various other kinds of violent actors and how they operate and how hard they are to control, and how, or I remember. If you look at the revolution in Nicaragua, for example,
Hmm.
and it is, and which is Central America in the 80s and well, 1979, but um, really it's throughout the 70s and it culminates in the late 70s, the overthrow of the Somoza regime. It took all kinds of different groups to accomplish this. It's not so the popular conception of
Right.
rebellion, which in some ways is what's reflected in Star Wars
Hmm.
more than it's reflected in Andor is okay, there's a really bad regime, enough people get mad about it, and they join some kind of rebellion, and then you overthrow the bad regime because people power. Well, that's really not, it's not that it's a simplistic story, right? And it's usually not the way that it works. It requires a coalition of various actors, right? Whether they are
Right.
people like the numbskulls with the playing rock paper scissors on Yavin, the Maya Peg brigade,
Hmm.
or whether it's fanatics like Saw Gerrera, or whether it's Mon Mothma in the Senate and her money men, and trying to find ways to funnel money, or Luthen, Rael, and Clea and their clandestine behavior, including
Hmm.
what is quite clearly terroristic activity. You're blowing things up and people are dying, and you're applying pressure asymmetrically to a more powerful adversary. This is how rebellions work, for good or for ill, whether you like them or not. That's how they work. Um, and I think one of the interesting things about Andor that amplifies, not ruins, but amplifies Star Wars is that it is a reminder that it's not just if you blow up one weapon or if you kill one person that
Hmm.
that solves the problem. In fact, and I think
Right.
I may have said it at the time, one of my gripes about Return of the Jedi, and also I think a missed opportunity in the prequel in the sequel trilogy is to deal with the fact that just killing Palpatine might not have been enough.
Right.
Because I mean, I understand the Star Wars universe, Palpatine's very important and very powerful and very central to all of this, but again, what did Andor show us? It showed us Krennic and Partagaz and all of these, Dedramira and all of these people who want this
Hmm.
system to work and are willing to work every day as bureaucrats to accomplish those goals. They don't necessarily all quit doing those things because Palpatine fell down a gas shaft on the Death Star tube.
Yeah. Gas shaft.
Yeah, that's all I could think of.
That's the phrase of the day. Gas shaft. Yeah, and there's actually somebody did a cartoon I remember about that. Like there are these two Imperial officers saying, well, the Death Star is gone again, and the Emperor's dead, but we still have a fleet, and we
That's right.
still have control of a whole bunch of planets. I guess we lost.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
I again, contemporary politics comes to mind, but just because I don't know, you take out the leader of a particular country, and by the time this comes out, I don't know where we're going to be in the Middle East.
Yeah.
But I will break that wall and point out that taking out a leader doesn't necessarily lead to the kinds of change you think it will, and you really can't predict
No.
what that change is going to be.
No, just like
That's just
taking the capital of another country doesn't
right,
mean, like, let's say, for example, Baghdad, that you don't know that things aren't going to spin out of control at that point.
right.
That you can predict the outcomes.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, yes, exactly.
so I put in my notes, since we're talking about the people who make authoritarianism or rebellion possible, sort of a gallery of characters that the show really kind of shows us. Do you mind if I go through that?
Please, let's go for it.
Because I think
I've
this
been
goes.
monologuing. It's your turn.
Okay, so I've been monologuing too, to be fair. But anyway, I think this is one of the great virtues of the show is that people will focus on a lot on like the moral shades of different
Right.
characters. But I also think it's like, what are their essential roles in the
Hmm.
creation of autocracy or in the resistance to it? So we saw on the dark side, the true believer and people who are usually are patsies like Cyril as true believers, who will
Right.
work against their own interests. You have the opportunist, the careerist kind of person. You have the sadist, the person who is brought in, kind of given a position they wouldn't have under normal circumstances that they can then, kind of inflict their dark desires on other people. So you have Dr. Grost
Yes.
and others. You have the technocrat,
Yeah.
the person who's just sort of there to uh, go ahead.
Well, just at different levels, right? I think you could
Yeah.
say that the corpo security guys in the very first episode fit
Yes.
that bill, and Dr. Gorst, who is just the worst.
Yeah. And he's
Um,
also arguably the technocrat, right?
he
The
is,
person
yeah.
who just looks at all of this very dispassionately as a job. I think Partagaz is like this.
Yeah, I
Uh,
always wonder what it would feel like if you pulled someone's thumbnails off. Let's just give it a try.
yeah, huh? What would that be like? The sort of the Eichmann like character,
Yes, absolutely.
the wealthy bystander, somebody who could resist but doesn't,
Yes,
like Perrin.
yes.
The flunky, like that little sergeant guy who was in corporate security with Cyril. I don't remember his character's name.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I don't remember either.
but a person who's almost kind of happy to be a flunky.
It was
Uh,
Sergeant Linus Mosk.
there we go. And of course the people who are frightened into paralysis. Would you add anybody else to that sort of gallery
On the Empire side?
on
No,
the
I think
Empire
that,
side?
yeah, I think that that fits.
Okay, and then on the rebellion
Oh, well,
side.
I
Oh,
will add one more thing. I
okay,
think maybe I'm sorry. My brain.
I knew
I,
it.
I know it's in there somewhere.
You're a political scientist. You're a smart guy. You got something to
Well,
say.
there are there are also people like although I guess she's kind of in the rebellion, but she was in the Empire. The woman that at the very first episode of season two, when he's stealing his TIE fighter, his
Yeah.
contact inside.
Oh yeah.
I thought she was interesting in that. So she doesn't quite fit your Empire template because she's helping the rebellion. But this is, I think, a really interesting part where she says, "I had fun here,"
Yeah.
which is a
Yes.
weird thing to say, but I had this job. She probably met people she liked. I mean, again,
Uh-huh.
this I think this also relates back to what we talked about in the first part of our discussion of season one. The functionaries or the troops at Aldani at the dam who just wanted to see the eye because it was they were
Yes.
really looking forward to it because it was a very human thing to want to do. So I think that's I don't know if this is quite fitting your categories, but there is this show does a really good job of identifying these are people who have jobs because well you get a you get a Coruscant you. What are you going to
Mm.
do? You get a
Right.
job with the government. Government jobs are good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you find yourself on Aldani or wherever I forget what planet there was the TIE fighter was on, and you're just doing your thing,
Hmm.
and maybe you realize something needs to be changed, maybe you don't. It's
Yeah.
the mundanity of all that is what
Yeah. It's like
interesting.
if you were living in the Soviet Union in the bad old days and you
Yes,
graduate from Moscow University, what do you do? Right.
yes,
what if you wind up working in a weapons program, or what if you wind up in something else that you find distasteful?
Right.
Um, I also, this person kind of then segues into the rebellion, but also there's the fed up collaborator, which
Hmm.
was both her and the lieutenant on Aldani,
Yes,
um, who's just was so happy to be able to tell his boss what he thought of him,
that's right.
finally.
That's right.
Okay, then on the rebellion side, you have the organizer,
Hmm.
so that's Luthen.
Yes.
But also, there are other people who play in that role in other factions. There's the elite
Mhm.
kind of, or the counter elite, I think maybe a better way of putting it. Like in some political scientists that we both know would argue that like, revolutions and rebellions and so forth are stories about, the incumbent elite versus a counter elite at some point. That
Right. Right.
you need to have those parts of it. You need to have everything else, but you also need to have people who have wealth and political experience and organizational skills and so forth to be able
Well,
to put.
we'll name drop our good friend Matthew Shugart, who early on
Yep.
in his career wrote about revolutions and talked about the not so much the elite counter elite thing, although that does come up, but also what I mentioned before, this sort of all the revolution is kind of an all class event. It's not just
Yes.
it's really is the top level all the way down. You don't again this narrative that it's just pissed off
Right.
uh, poor people who take down authoritarian regimes is just wrong.
Right. Yeah, and when we were graduate students, or undergraduates, that was we heard a lot from our professors at the time too. I'm thinking about Professor Eckstein in
Yes,
particular. That
yes,
it's not an either or. That on the one hand you could say, well, you have to have a lot of pissed off people
yes,
who hate the current system. True, but you also need to have leads. So there's a political scientist named Tilly. Look
yes,
him up. Who had that particular point of view.
yes,
So
yes.
there's that person. There's the
I'm sorry. I'm just remembering teaching this and calling them pods, pissed off dudes.
pissed off
My
dudes.
students liked the pissed off
Okay.
dudes. Anyway,
And dudettes. Come on.
and dudettes,
Let's not
but
be
it's
sexist,
it's.
Stephen.
I was considering an inclusive term.
Yes.
It's like Mr. Seven.
Okay, we're really getting off topic. The
Yes,
etymology of the word
yes,
dude.
yes, yes,
Okay, so the ruthless operative,
yes.
you need those people. You need you need both strategists and tacticians.
Mhm.
You need the recruiters, and of course, you need the supporters.
Yes.
Anyone else you'd add to that list?
Where would you put Saw Gerrera and the Fanatics?
The fanatics. Yeah, I. That's an interesting one. Because there are arguments to be made that by some people that the fanatics are ultimately what ruin revolutions, and like
Hmm.
the Jacobins are the ones who
Right.
responsible for wrecking the French Revolution, according to one interpretation. Or maybe you need people who are uncompromising to keep everybody, you know, persevering through tough times. I don't know, but those people play a role.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer either, and
Yeah.
maybe it's a question of how fanatic, maybe not quite fanatic, but just a little fanatic, little on the edge.
Yeah.
Again, to quote previous episodes, you want to get nuts, let's get nuts.
Yep.
I don't know, but it's an interesting question. I mean, fighting a war is difficult to begin with, but yeah, you don't want to
Right.
get too far off the deep end, but you may need to be on the edge of the deep end on occasion.
Yeah, I mean, so that people like Saw Gerrera raise all kinds of interesting practical and moral questions, obviously.
Yes, yes,
Like, is he just a more extreme version of Luthen?
right, exactly.
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
it doesn't feel that way.
right.
Luthen often would do things, pretty horrible, in order to keep the revolution alive. But he also seemed to have limits.
So Luthen, in this, I guess, in some ways, we can what you're dealing with affects this, and we've mentioned a little bit of it in the previous parts of this
Yeah,
conversation. But Luthen is calculating and he's
yeah,
strategic in a way that I don't know that Saw is entirely. Saw, in fact, I think, as I recall, as you transition from what's happening in Andor to what's happening in Rogue One. He's really kind of going off the rails a little bit,
Right.
and also endangering himself because he's on Jet at that point, and there's an Imperial Star Destroyer hovering, like you can see it there. So maybe they shouldn't be there at that point, but he's
Right.
pressing forward on what he thinks needs to be done. He's really not coordinating with the folks on Yavin.
Mm-mm.
So he is a loose wire. There's a loose cannon. I'm
Loose
sorry.
cannon.
I knew
Yeah.
it was loose something. I was going with hot potato. That didn't work. Loose wire didn't work. But
No, loose pants.
loose cannon. Wacky potato. I don't know. He's
Wacky potato.
at any rate. But
New from
uh,
Milton Bradley.
okay, I'm going to stop there. Anyway, I'm going to say that yeah, he's not. The funny thing was, it struck me. They've been called the Rebel Alliance from the very beginning, right? Which just kind of sounds like a cool name in Star Wars.
Yeah,
You realize in Andor, it really is an alliance of different rebel groups. So
exactly.
literally the Rebel Alliance, and not all the parts all work together the way you would like them to.
Which
Um,
again is very typical
yes,
of
yes,
revolutions, right?
absolutely.
Or counter revolutions. Like you look at all the different factions in the Chinese Civil War. I mean, actually one of the reasons that the communists had an edge over their opponents was there were all these little
Yes.
squabbling factions aside from the Kuomintang.
No, I didn't mean
Yeah,
to stop you. I was going to.
yeah. Yeah, it just that's such a feature of the French Revolution. All revolutions have a degree of factionalism to some point.
Yeah, so I mean, that's another reason why. I guess this is another reason why screenwriters should hire political scientists because if they had, the sequel trilogy would have been a lot better. Because the main thing is that the rebels could have defeated the Empire. That's at least a possibility. You, in fact, do take
Yeah.
out their major weapons, and if you then uh, break the leadership, and then if you find a way to then have those segments that are still like, there's got to be other planets, other senators like Mon Mothma or Bail Organa or whomever who also didn't like the rebellion, or didn't like the Empire, and might have helped tear
Mhm.
things down. But then they would have been fighting amongst the factions of the Rebel Alliance about what the new Republic was supposed to look like,
Right.
right? Because
Yeah.
that's the way that it works.
Hmm.
And often, in fact, sometimes the fanatics take over, even though they shouldn't.
Right. Well, that's that
Yeah,
their militancy, their ruthlessness gives,
yeah,
and their organizational
yes,
skill gives them an advantage. And in Nicaragua,
yes. It's a
in
great example.
Russia, in
Yes,
Iran.
yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yes. All those cases, and you
Yeah.
keep going. In Cuba,
Yep. Exactly right.
that there were multiple factions that rebelled against the dictatorship in those cases.
Hmm.
But then they fought it out after the rebellion took place, after the revolution happened, as to who's going to be in charge.
Right.
Um, and often the more militant groups are the ones that are able to, the ones that control the weapons are often the ones that win the day.
Yes.
And it's often not the Mon Mothmas, because Mon
Right.
Mothma doesn't control weapons. Saw Gerrera has weapons,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
so forth. And so anyway, that's just it's an interest. There are lots of interesting parallels, and clearly Gilroy understands this in ways that many other writers of this have not.
Right.
Okay. Did you finish your list?
No, I finished my list. I eventually want to jump back to an earlier point, but
Well, if this is a good point, go. Where do you want to jump?
well, so this is again to go back to, does this ruin Star Wars for you? Or does it enhance Star Wars in some way? So I have a more neutral comment. Uh,
Okay.
so it makes me look at the attempts to try to make the original Star Wars movie profound, perhaps with I don't know, a little less forgivingness, a little for trying to come up with a philosophy of Star Wars. So like when Star Wars came out, of course Lucas was talking about Joseph Campbell and the
Oh
hero's
yes.
journey, I think as far back as then. But then there was the interviews between Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell, that became a hot item among a lot of people, not just Star Wars fans, but genuinely a lot of them Star Wars fans, because Campbell made the explicit link to Star Wars. And it always really seemed like a very minor observation, the whole hero's journey sort of sort of hypothesis, because what does it tell you? It's like there was a guy who wrote a book that said there are like something like 1,400 plots, and those are
Right.
all the plots of every book, play, movie, anything. Those are all the stories, right? So really, every author is just picking one of these things. And so, if that's true, so what?
Right.
So what? So if there is a lot of literature that are, and I don't put a lot of stock in the Campbell notions
Hmm.
about mythology, but if you believe, take them at face value, so what? What do you do with that? Like,
Right.
okay, that's an interesting party topic of conversation, trying to impress your friends or try to, play the game of whatever other stories might follow that particular arc. And talk about also maybe some stories that don't follow that arc that are pretty good, but it doesn't lead you anywhere.
Star Wars is a great adventure movie.
Right.
So to get back to my own somewhat flippant question about did it ruin Star Wars? Clearly not. Star Wars is a fun movie. It does contain within it some morality plays about good and evil. It doesn't really spell out really I mean, we know the Empire's
Hmm.
evil. Well, I take that back. There's genocide. So, I mean, there's plenty of evil
There's
on
that.
screen.
Yeah.
But I mean, until they blow up the planet, until they blow up Alderaan, right?
Hmm.
They don't really do anything that we know for sure. We just know that they're the bad guys. There's music that tells us they're the bad guys. I mean, for crying out loud, the Goobers named their weapon the Death Star. I mean,
Right.
they can't be good guys. So, um, a
There's a
lot,
funny Mitchell and Webb skit about like Professor Death.
uh,
He's producing all these devices, like the death machine or the
yes.
death ray and so forth. But like the death ray turns out what it does is like it scans your items at checkout. Like he was the guy who
Yeah,
invented it. That
yeah.
was the death ray. It's like,
I think
oh,
I
wait
did.
a minute,
Yeah.
you have a point. You think, what? That is a terrible name for this.
So, um, yeah, the hero's journey discussion. I mean, so many of these movies are in some ways the hero's journey, so it's not that profound, I guess.
Yeah, but it's like a so what as an
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
observation.
So, and this is it could be a short discussion or a long one, and we're probably starting to get to where we need to think about winding up a little bit. But I mean, so
Hmm.
the politics of the show, we've already kind of talked about the sort of the historical inputs that Gilroy had to the thing. We've talked a little bit about how it does reflect. We could talk more about it, but how it at least certainly rhymes a lot with contemporary political concerns that we
Hmm.
see both here and other places.
Yeah.
Um, I think the politics of the rebellion are probably better spelled out than the politics of the empire, even in this narrative. At least we have Nimic's
Hmm.
manifesto, we have Marva's speech, we have various speeches by Luthen, we have, um, you know, uh, we didn't talk about it, but there's a smaller speech, is not quite the right way to describe it, when he's trying to recruit Cassian in like the third episode, I think, or second or third episode. He says something about that voice, the voice that tells you to stop,
Hmm.
and this sort of
Right.
all that kind of stuff. And so I clearly it's a politics focused on freedom and self-determination that's not being allowed to take place in this imperial circumstance. And I think the politics of the empire, beyond serving whatever perverse things Palpatine wants,
Hmm.
which really we don't. It's Palpatine's name check, but he's not really a presence in this film or this TV series. It is about order, though. It's clearly about order and a particular desire to just keep everyone in line, right? That's
Hmm.
well. What are your thoughts about either the politics of the empire, or the politics of the rebellion, that you can glean from the narrative?
Well, it's sort of like the politics of the empire is sort of dry. Like
Right,
I wouldn't call what the empire is doing fascist. Like
right,
it's not this callback to a mythical past, a la Mussolini's,
right.
fascism or anybody else's brand of fascism. It is just putting into place the instruments of autocratic control.
Right.
So in that sense, I think that's what I'd say about the politics of the empire. How would you characterize it?
No, I mean, I think there's sort of a fascist aesthetic to it all.
Yeah.
I agree that we don't really know enough, even whatever we get about, because I guess the most we get out of Palpatine is in the prequels, and Lucas is not good about politics, period.
No.
Um, and it really is unclear as to what he really wants, except he wants order and control,
Hmm.
personal order and control. It's almost,
Yeah.
to use another term, a patrimonial, to use
Yes.
Weberian terms. But you really can't govern a galaxy that way. And there really is a simplistic. I mean, Princess Leia is right in Star Wars when she says, "The more you tighten your grip, the
Yeah.
more," because you the kind of control on that scale, even with the Death Star, is not really achievable. You want
Right.
to kill everybody, fine,
Right.
but that's not control, is it?
No.
That's something else. So a lot of so I think, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's some sort of Sith past that Palpatine wants to look back on, but I don't know that Lucas ever figured that out. So in that sense, it just becomes bad guy wants to control everybody. That's what it boils down to. And then what
Yeah.
we see is just the banality of evil of a bureaucracy that's been created and directed toward control.
Mhm. Yeah.
But we don't really know what they want it to control for.
Right.
Um,
And on
and
the flip side, the rebellion also doesn't seem to have
no,
much of an ideology other than resisting that control. And
yes,
the differences are a difference of tactics.
yes.
Not a vision of whatever the future is.
I mean, this is sort of, yeah, this notion, I guess, that we don't want a king, hence republic. I'll have a comment about that here in a second.
Yeah.
And that we want the Senate to still be empowered, but that strikes me as an incredibly unruly body. Um, I don't know how
Yes.
you actually function with that many members. Um, and even what the powers of the Senate are supposed to be, except it just sounds cool to have a Senate.
Hmm.
I mean, floaty, little speech chambers are
Platforms.
cool
Yeah.
and all. I'm trying to think
Yeah.
of the word the lecterns, floaty
Yeah.
lectern rooms. Anyway, regardless, it really ultimately is unclear how the galaxy is supposed to be governed and what the point is. What do you really want to
Right.
accomplish? Even this sort of lame attempt in, say, the Phantom Menace about trade wars, it doesn't really make sense. But
No.
I'll make this comment, and maybe we can decide whether you have anything to say about this. I'm whether it's a pretty weird republic, which
Hmm.
again, not to get off on this, friends, but republic in its core means, among other things, no king. That's what the term basically means.
Yeah.
Governance, it means it can manifest in a variety of ways. Um, but it's weird. No wonder your republic fell apart. This is my political science statement. No wonder you had a sucky republic if many of the member and constituent elements of that republic are clearly either aristocracies or oligarchies,
Right.
right?
Right.
Princess Leia and Bail Organa, I forget in the lore, is some kind of royal person on or
Hmm.
Alderaan.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Queen Amidala, Leia's mother and Luke's mother, is
Hmm.
Queen of Naboo, and somehow that makes her a senator, like ex officio. Um, the Chandrillans are clearly an oligarchic kind of society, and being
Yeah.
rich makes you senator or somehow helps you become senator. So no wonder this all fell apart, people.
Right.
No wonder.
Yeah.
I don't think
Okay.
anything else to say than that.
No,
That's
I,
just that's my
yeah.
ancient political science gripe.
Boy, we really got inside baseball this episode, didn't we?
Uh, it could have
Anyway.
gotten worse. I could have said a bunch of stuff about Nicaragua that nobody would have known what I was talking about. Although Violeta
No,
Chamorro,
but
she
it,
died this week, by the way.
I
So
saw that. Yeah.
yeah,
But anyway, but I think that's useful,
yeah,
because these are the real world analogs from
yes,
which Andor was derived
yes,
by Tony Gilroy's own account, right? That he's a
yes,
history
yes,
buff, and
yes,
this is the kind of content that he had on his mind when he was writing this.
yes.
Um, so I always want to throw in something as
Go
we
right
talked
ahead.
about mindless entertainment.
Okay.
Um, so I think this is a kind of a good point because we've been looking at comics and TV shows
Yes,
and
yes,
books and so forth. There's clearly a continuum, right?
yes,
mindless entertainment. You're just there for the entertainment, the spectacle. I think I call it spectacle, right?
Okay.
Because you could be entertained in a different way, but there's entertainment because of spectacle.
Okay.
Exciting things happening to people you identify with, and you know, uh, whatever other kinds of visual elements or audio
Mhm.
elements and so forth make it interesting. So, movies I've liked like that. The first MCU movie, Iron Man,
Yeah, that's good.
Predator, the Giant Claw.
Caw.
The first of the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on, right? They're not there. There's no message there. There's no overt moral to the story. Um, then on the other end of the continuum, there's a very heavy-handed, didactic sort of filmmaking. And I think in the geek world, this would include things like Silent Running, very strong ecological message, District 9, very strong immigrant message,
Soylent Green.
Soylent Green, Idiocracy, Waterworld, maybe not as much. But anyway, there are things that are in between. And there are things like Minority Report. It came from outer space, which we talked about in a previous episode, The Day the Earth Stood Still, where they have ideas that have big importance. Like Minority
Mhm.
Report is, if you had a surveillance society where people could predict that you were going to commit a crime, how easily could that be abused? Aside from just other problems with it,
Right.
my favorite movie, of all time is Casablanca.
Yes.
Casablanca has it's a story about someone struggling whether to do the right thing or not.
Right.
But those I think make some of the most interesting stories for grown-ups. They don't abandon the mindless entertainment, exciting elements,
Hmm.
but they also don't steer too hard into the heavy-handed didactic stuff. And I think that's where Andor kind of
I
is.
agree.
Yeah.
No, I think it's an excellent point. I mean, and again, as the more ancient I get, to cleave back to that element of the show here, the more I appreciate how much I appreciate really good acting, really well written dialogue, well shot scenes, and that
Hmm.
stories that might make me think a little bit about what's going on here.
Right.
Um, uh, More, I mean, I like shoot. I mean, I think about spectrums and like there are things that just entertain me. But if I think like I mentioned a couple episodes back that I watched the most recent season of Doctor Who. I'm not going to go deep down
Hmm.
that rabbit hole right now. There are episodes in both the most recent seasons of Doctor Who that if I think about them for more than 10 seconds, it's like, okay, this doesn't make any
Hmm.
sense.
Right.
But I was entertained when I watched them, so I don't regret watching them, but it's like I'm not going to sit around thinking about this for weeks on end. I mean, I've thought about Andor quite
No.
a lot since I
Yeah.
watched it. And not just, because oh, what's the moral ambiguity of Luth and Rail? That's not even that's part of it, but it's just really about complex stories told complexly that I really appreciate. But it's
Right.
not super heavy-handed either. Um, I don't feel like I'm being told this is the lessons I'm supposed to have gotten out of this.
Right.
Um, it's like history itself. I mean, history is the reality of what happens. I want to say, history, uh, the study of what happened versus what, and that's anyway, I'm trying to say there. I would say
Hmm.
that just reality itself is like that, right? It's not always clear cut, but it can be very interesting and useful. It can also be quite depressing, depends on what we're talking about. But uh, it, it's not always neat and tidy, and that's okay if
No.
the, if the stories aren't totally neat and tidy either.
Exactly. Exactly.
And like Star Wars is pretty neat and tidy, which is fine. It's an adventure movie and it's an entertaining movie and it's one I've watched
It's a
many
great
many
movie.
many times
Yeah.
and I can watch it. Like, I'll watch again, but it does lack some of the depth that this had when
I,
that
I
many
look
galaxies
forward to
away.
watching it with my great grandchildren
There
someday.
you go. There you go. So, is there anything? That's all of my questions, I think. I think we've hit
Yeah, I think
everything.
that's all of mine too.
Is there anything else that we did not mention? I have one thing if you don't, but it's a minor thing, but I wanted to mention it. Anything about Andor or Rogue One that we did not cover that you wanted to bring up here before we draw this to a conclusion?
No, I'm good. Except to once again, it's nice in stories like this to have occasional moments of humor.
Yes.
And I thought that Andor kind of had those at moments, like when K2 comes in, as a character, it kind of
Yes.
had the same role as a little bit of comedy relief without being silly like
Yes.
C3PO.
Yes.
That was nice. And there are other little bits like that throughout.
So another thing that's nice that's not about complex acting or about great writing is sometimes it's nice to have a total badass effects scene that
Yes.
I forgot to call out when we talked about the show. The scene where Luthen is captured by the Imperial tractor beam ship,
Oh yeah.
and then he launches that countermeasure against the dish.
Yes.
That's a remarkable space battle.
Right.
Just amazing.
And how it pirouettes,
Yeah,
and with the blasters and cuts up the TIE fighters.
yeah, yeah. It's just great.
Yeah.
But and just the look on the face of the Imperials,
Yes.
like what just
What
happened?
I know.
Especially since they realized that, at least as far as they were concerned, he had appropriate signal. They should let him go, but they were going to
Right.
board him anyway just for practice. Like,
Yeah, okay.
that serves
Maybe
you
you
right.
learned your lesson. All right. Are
Anyway,
we ready for the wrap-up question?
I think we are. So finally, after 3 episodes, we get back to merch. Do you have any merch? Do you
I
want any
don't have any
merch?
merch currently. I have ordered a t-shirt that says I have friends everywhere.
Oh, well, that's excellent. So
How about you?
the merch, the closest I can come to merch is I have listened to quite a few podcasts about this program.
Hmm.
And I would recommend at a bare minimum The Watch, which is the name of the podcast. And there's several interviews over both seasons with Tony Gilroy that are really worth listening to. Additionally, if you're like me, who after you watch a show you really like, you like hearing people talk about it, the stuff that was done on Decoding TV was good. And
Hmm.
I would also say Space the Nation, there's some good discussion about the show with Dan Dresner and Anna Marie Cox. So that's as close to merch as it gets when you're in your 50s, I guess. Although that's not entirely true.
Yeah.
What I want, I would love to have a miniature of Luthen ship, maybe in Lego.
Hmm. Yeah. I would like to have a B2 EMO.
There you go. Perfect, perfect. All right then. Our Andor marathon has come to a conclusion. Thank you all for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future. See you next week.
That brings us to a close of our Death Star-sized coverage of the TV series Andor. Thanks for listening. You can find us on the podcast platform or app of your choice. We'd be grateful if you'd subscribe, and even more grateful if you leave us some feedback. And most of all, tell a friend. If you want to contact us directly, drop us a line at someancientgeeks@gmail.com. Look for us on Reddit, Facebook, Blue Sky, and other social media outlets. All content copyright 2025, Tom Grant and Stephen Taylor. Music by Reversed Image, whom you can find on Pixabay. See you next time.